Hi there and welcome. Steve Wills here. Thanks for joining me. In this particular video, we'll be looking at some of the more advanced concepts in process automation, building on what we have already presented in prior videos. Some of those concepts that we'll be looking at here today, I'll enumerate on the screen. And so the first one we'll be looking at is what's known as a state stack. Here is where we push on state names onto the stack and pop them off as we go through the workflow. Marketing will go through the states in one order, while sales will go through in a different order. This allows us to essentially combine multiple workflows in the same basic model. And I'll demonstrate how that stack works, as you can see in the diagram in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And so as marketing goes through the workflow, those state names are being popped off of the stack one at a time until all of the state names have been popped off the stack, in which case the document will be routed on to Director. We'll rapidly go through sales, again, going through the same states except in a different order. I'll display the rule definitions for the virtual state virtual 01 up in the top of the screen there. So here we are going through the various permutations. And lastly, we'll look at the intervention logs for each user. As you can see, the two different orders that the states were addressed. And this is how to make it happen. As you can see here, this is where the two stacks were initialized differently. Onto the virtual document, these rules are executed immediately. And lastly, where the stack is actually maintained. On to user stack. Essentially the same principle, except this time we'll be adding usernames onto the stack as opposed to states. Now, ideally, you would have an approval matrix stored in documents. If it was a purchase request application, for example, it might be based on the type of request, the amount, and so on and so forth. But basically what we're doing here is we are getting those users using code abstraction and getting the usernames into the document in the appropriate order, as you can see here. Now, combined with a approval matrix, this essentially allows us to create a generic approval circuit. We will be going back and forth through validation and virtual 01, those two states, popping off usernames as we're going through those two states. And that will continue until all of the usernames have been popped off the stack, in which case the document will be routed on to Director. And here's the historical log here. So on to the definitions. As you can see here, the user stack is initialized in the initial state. That is the code abstraction that brings those users' names into the workflow document. And the document is immediately routed on to validation. As you can see, the virtual state definition. And there are the rules that says keep going until the stack is empty. Now, there is where the stack is maintained. It looks a bit nasty, but the code never changes. So it essentially provides a generic approval circuit. These last two are relatively simple. They execute an agent or a backend script code, but this time based on time. That time can be based on a particular state or even a set of states. So here we are going to see where the title of the document has been added. And a log entry has been added. How to make it happen? Time trigger documents, of course, you've seen in prior videos. This is where we can define when this code is executed. So here after 2 days. And here is where the code is executed. As you can see, asterisk indicates an agent. That other symbol, whatever it's called, actually executes back-end code. And here's the code here, and the connection between the code abstraction and the call to the routine. And lastly, the agent that was executed. Lastly, the state subroutines, essentially the same ideas, except here the code is going to be executed based on a transparent state change. Transparent because the user will not be aware of the change of state. So in this particular example, we're going to do 2 things. Here we'll create a purchase order. You can see the document being added to the view there. And secondly, we'll be essentially launching an agent. Now we called it run agent. Of course, we can call it anything we like. It's just text. And so you can see here the state name has not changed. So in appearance, the user is unaware of the state being changed. The intervention log is updated as we would want. And here the log entry has been added. So how to make it happen? Here in the process doc, you can see where those 2 options are presented to the user. The historical log is updated. You can see where the agent is executed and the PO created. For the 2 virtual documents, the virtual states, you can see the definition here, where the document is immediately routed, the log is not updated, and lastly, routed immediately back to process doc. And the same is true here for run agent. So some of the benefits, it's always important to remember that this is based on a complete and consistent methodology, and this allows for possibilities that were never envisioned when the tool was created. State stack, multiple processes can be combined into one workflow. User stack, essentially creating a generic approval process, particularly in combination with an approval matrix. Time and state routines, either being executed on elapsed time or a transparent state change. Well, that's it for this particular video. I hope you found it to be interesting and helpful. If you would like me to create other videos with concepts that you have yet to see in these, please leave me a note here and under the video. Thanks so much for joining me.